You and Johnny dated. How would you characterize that relationship?
We just wrapped Sybil. I was sort of dragging myself around in some, coma of like emotional dither.
We went together very well, but not necessarily for the right reasons.
She's lived a life filled with Oscars, iconic roles, and unshakable determination, but at 78, Sally Field admits there are 6 men she's never truly moved on from. What makes their presence linger even after the final scene? From romances that burned too bright to wounds that never fully healed, find out how each man carved a permanent mark on her journey and what it says about unfinished business, heartbreak, and the search for self-discovery. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Number 1, Burt Reynolds. Sally Field once called Burt Reynolds a piece of my heart, but their romance was far from a fairy tale. The two met while filming Smokey and the Bandit, a blockbuster defined by their fiery on-screen chemistry. Audiences may have seen effortless charm and playful banter, but behind the scenes, this same magnetism fueled a volatile relationship. For Field, Reynolds represented excitement and intensity, but he was also a man grappling with insecurities that shaped how he treated her. Reynolds, though deeply captivated by Field, often tried to control her. He believed he was helping her by refining her image or steering her decisions.
When you met him, when you met up, it was, and there was an instantaneous, I think is the word you use, connection.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you and Burt still friends?
We don't really talk to each other, no.
He often says, you're the one that got away.
I say in the book many times, if I could have been different, would he have been different?
Yet his influence left her feeling diminished. In her memoir, Field described how his need to mold her into his ideal partner eroded her sense of self-worth. Their relationship, she said, was heavy, complicated, and not without loving and caring, but really not without hurting. Despite this, their bond continued for years, defined by a cycle of passion, heartbreak, and reconciliation. Even after their split, Reynolds confessed he never got over her, calling her the love of his life. For Field, the sentiment was bittersweet, a profound connection that taught her as much about herself as it did about love. Number 2, Stephen Craig. At just 19, Sally Field married Stephen Craig, looking for the kind of stability her chaotic upbringing lacked. Back then, the idea of a steady, predictable life felt like the answer she'd been searching for. Craig represented a safe harbor, someone who could shield her from the turbulence she was so used to. And at first, that security was exactly what she needed. The two started a family together, with Field embracing her role as a young mother, creating the kind of life she had once dreamed of. But as years passed, what had seemed comforting began to feel confining. Field's ambitions grew as her acting career gained momentum, but Craig struggled to understand the drive that pushed her forward. She wanted something more, something beyond the boundaries of their traditional life. According to Field, her rising fame created a quiet tension in their home. Craig managed to endure her career, but she felt increasingly invisible in their marriage, lying awake at night wondering why the relationship felt so empty.
So it was just a risk. You just sometimes take a risk.
No,
I was never a person that knew how to say no to people. Wow. I mean, I when it came down to things, I said, yeah.
Number 3, James Garner. James Garner made an impression on Sally Field that went beyond words. Their chemistry in Murphy's romance was effortless, but it reflected something deeper than the roles they played on screen. Garner had a magnetism that wasn't loud or overpowering. It was steady, intelligent, and above all, genuine. He had a way of making Field feel completely at ease, a rare and welcome change from the more complicated relationships she'd experienced. In his presence, she didn't need to perform. She could simply be herself. But their bond remained unspoken, marked by circumstances neither could change. Garner's loyalty to his wife was unshakable, and Field's own emotional scars held her back. While they never crossed that line, the connection they shared lingered in her mind long after the cameras stopped rolling. Field admitted to feeling something profound for Garner, a kind of soul-level understanding that left her wondering about roads untaken. For Field, it was the what if of it all that stayed with her. A peculiar kind of heartache, knowing something remarkable existed but couldn't happen. Garner's quiet strength and sincerity left a lasting imprint, one she remembered as a bittersweet reminder of a connection that, while never fully realized, never truly faded. Number 4, Dustin Hoffman. Not all relationships that leave a mark are born of love. For Sally Field, her encounter with Dustin Hoffman during an audition in the early 1980s was unforgettable, but for all the wrong reasons. By then, Hoffman was already an established name in Hollywood, while Field was still fighting to carve out her place. The project they were meeting for never came to fruition, but the emotional scar from that day stayed with Field for decades. During the audition, Field was met with what can only be described as calculated diminishment. Hoffman, as she later recalled, was brilliant but belittling. He interrupted her lines, mocked her delivery in real time, and turned the producers' reactions into a kind of weapon, subtly amplifying their doubt in her abilities. In that moment, Field went from being a talent in her own right to feeling like she didn't belong. It wasn't just about his words, it was the entire balance of power in the room. Number 5, Tom Hanks. Sometimes, the most profound connections are the quietest. For Sally Field, her bond with Tom Hanks during the making of Forrest Gump became one of those rare relationships defined by genuine mutual respect. On set, their dynamic was easy, filled with warmth and laughter. Hanks had a way of making everyone feel at ease, and for Field, that ease felt like something deeper, acceptance she didn't have to earn or fight for. Their collaboration wasn't marked by intensity or friction, but by a rare kind of understanding. Field herself has hinted at how Hanks's generosity and steady demeanor stood out. Unlike some of the more complicated relationships she'd experienced, he never made her feel less than or overshadowed. He valued her as an equal, not just a scene partner or a name on the call sheet. It was an atmosphere where she could simply exist and be appreciated for who she was, a rarity in any industry, let alone Hollywood. Though their bond was strictly platonic, the closeness they shared left an undeniable mark on Field. For her, Hanks provided the kind of quiet kindness and support she had so often longed for. With him, there was no unfinished business, only enduring gratitude. Number 6, Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he took over every inch of it. For Sally Field, Brando was more than just an actor. He was a myth, an untamed force of nature who defied Hollywood's rules and expectations. She was captivated by the sheer brilliance he carried in his performances, but even more so by the enigma behind the persona. His disregard for convention and his unpredictability spoke to something inside her, even as it intimidated her. She later admitted to imagining what it would be like to be in his presence, describing him as the storm I wanted to be swept away by. But storms do more than stir up passion, they can destroy. Brando's life was marked by chaos, and his emotional unavailability created a distance that no fantasy could bridge. Their connection remained unresolved, both tantalizing and frustrating. I would have drowned, Field confessed, reflecting on what could have been if she had let herself fall into his orbit completely. Decades later, Brando still lingers in her thoughts, his ghost appearing in her dreams. Sally has called him the most impossible man I ever wanted, a reminder that sometimes the unattainable leaves the deepest mark. These 6 men weren't just relationships in Sally Field's life. They were mirrors, reflecting every stage of her search for identity. Each brought her joy, heartbreak, or frustration, but all left her with lessons she couldn't forget. As she once said, love doesn't always come wrapped in ribbons. Sometimes it comes in bruises, silence, or the echo of someone who never said goodbye. It's a reminder of how connection isn't always simple or even satisfying, but it shapes who we are. Which of these stories resonated with you most? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching.